After Exposure, Asbestos and Mesothelioma Stories, a podcast from the Mesothelioma Center at asbestos.com. On this episode, we take a first-hand look at treating asbestos cancers 25 years after 9/11. Your host is Amy Adele, Senior Editor and Content Strategist for the Mesothelioma Center at asbestos.com.
So welcome. Today we're talking with Dr. Raja Flores, Chairman of Thoracic Surgery at Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York City. He's also a professor of surgery at Icahn School of Medicine and a world-renowned thoracic surgeon and pleural mesothelioma specialist, whose latest research examines whether limited surgery can help people with unresectable pleural mesothelioma manage symptoms while continuing systemic treatment. Dr. Flores also treated patients with asbestos-related lung cancer and mesothelioma following 9/11. Dr. Flores, thank you so much for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work at Mount Sinai?
So thank you for having me. I'm a thoracic surgeon. I've been doing thoracic surgery for over 30 years. And my experience with mesothelioma started in New York when I had my first patient when I was doing my residency at Columbia Presbyterian. And there was a patient with mesothelioma, and that's when I first started learning about it. Then I did my residency, my fellowship actually, cardiothoracic surgery at the Brigham in Boston with David Sugarbaker. And then that gave me a vast experience in doing surgery for mesothelioma. And then my first job was at Sloan Kettering with Valerie Rush, who was also a mesothelioma guru. And my first case ever as an attending surgeon was an extrapleural pneumonectomy for mesothelioma. And then all my research and everything with Harvey Pass, and that all seems like ages ago. So then I was 10 years at Sloan Kettering, and now I am 16 years at Mount Sinai, where's the longest that I've ever been in one place.
That's amazing. So, now as we're approaching the anniversary of 9/11, the 25th anniversary this year, I know that that's been something that you've talked about. You've shared that with us before. You've written blogs and talked about what that experience was like, building on your knowledge and experience with these kinds of cancers. And asbestos was certainly a big issue tied to 9/11. The fire, the destruction of the building, and the plume that was over New York. And you've talked a little bit about that before. And so I really appreciate you coming and sharing some more of those insights with us, and kind of a look back, and then kind of a look at today and a look ahead. So one thing I just wanted to note, so in preparing for today, I was looking, and the World Trade Center Health Program estimates that more than 400,000 people may have had some connection to the 9/11 disaster, and more than 140,000 people currently belong to the program. Based on your experience, do those numbers surprise you at all?
No, not at all. And 8,000 have died since. So the 9/11 story, the World Trade Center story, is a very, very personal thing for me. As a New Yorker, I was born and raised in that city. As a kid, I would skateboard in the plaza between the Twin Towers while we were getting chased away by the security guards. And then during college, I worked at the World Trade Center. I worked for UPS, delivering through all those offices and around the entire area. So when those buildings came down, a piece of me died. One of my high school classmates, Chris Hanley, died in those buildings. And there's actually a voice recording of him on the internet, stuck in the top floor of the World Trade Center. So it hits me both on a personal level and on a professional level. Many of the diseases that I deal with, lung cancer, mesothelioma, esophageal cancer, are the result of the exposure to that cloud that went over 9/11. I mean, I went down there the day it happened. I got on my bicycle. I went down there to try and help out, and you either died or you walked away. There were a few patients that were treated at St. Vincent's or at Bellevue, but mainly for inhalation. There wasn't a ton that you could do. And so nowadays, my specialty involves a lot of these cancers. We also have the World Trade Center program at Mount Sinai that treats these patients every day. But the sad thing is that there are more people who have died as of today from exposure to illnesses from 9/11 that actually died on that day. And many of those people who died were first responders, firemen, police officers, construction workers. Then you had the people who lived downtown, who went to school downtown, where they thought the air was safe, but clearly it wasn't. And so many of them are coming down with illnesses as a result of the pulverized concrete, the asbestos that we know was in that dust, the pulverized metal, and they're having many diseases that are chronic. I mean, the number one thing, a lot of chronic sinusitis. The second most common thing is cancer. These people are dying from cancer. And then you have some patients who don't die from cancer who are continuing to live with the fear of dying from cancer. So it's interesting. They just realized that the 25th anniversary of 9/11 is coming up this September. And they finally have a new moment of silence for people who have died with 9/11 illnesses. And this is the first time that they're ever doing it. And like I said, there 8,000 people at least have died since then. And finally, they're getting acknowledged. The one group who is not getting acknowledged is the group who developed cancer during that time, but have still not died. And so I am seeing patients that I've operated on for lung cancer from 9/11, esophageal cancer from 9/11, who have survived because of surgery, because of a combination of chemo and radiation, but they are not being acknowledged. You're only acknowledged after you die. And for them, 9/11 wasn't just one day. It's still happening. It hasn't ended for them. And I think that's an important take-home message. This new 25th anniversary will finally acknowledge the people who are dying from 9/11 illnesses, but it's still not focusing on those who were there, who are still alive and are currently suffering, which is why it's very important. Everything is intertwined. You know, we need legislation to make sure they can get taken care of. And we just need to keep an eye on what is happening as these diseases develop so that we can take care of them.
Do you think, from your experience, that the public health response, like what that's looked like over the last 25 years, has raised awareness, not just with the people who were first responders or were part of the recovery efforts on the site, but like you mentioned, the people who lived and worked in the city, people whose kids were playing on the playgrounds, they were doing their shopping, living their lives, but that plume was over the city. Do you feel that the awareness campaigns or public outreach for people who lived there and could have been exposed has been helpful in raising that kind of awareness?
I think it has been helpful to some people. In other words, to the people who you can reach. There's some people who you couldn't reach, who are not tuned in, who may be suffering from this stuff, from their exposure. You know, one of the high schools that was down there was Stuyvesant High School, one of the best, most prestigious public high schools in New York. And those kids have written beautifully about what they felt, what they experienced, and how they felt that the recovery and the awareness to that entire area could have been a lot better. And of course, hindsight's 2020. You know, when a disaster is happening, you pay attention to it. So in other words, the catastrophe that was 9/11, meaning all those people died when the buildings comes down, that captures your attention. That is, the entire world knows that. What people don't get is the disease that has been happening day in and day out, that's ignored. Well, not ignored, but that's not given the same attention as a natural disaster. One death at a time, one day at a time, one person suffering. And now, like I said, 8,000 deaths later, we're finally acknowledging what's happening. And that's something that I've dealt with my entire career with mesothelioma. You get exposed to mesothelioma, it's not till 20, 30 years later that you're suffering from it. And that's the same thing that's happening here. They were exposed to it. Now here we are 25 years later. We shouldn't be surprised that 8,000 patients are dead. And we're going to continue to get some more. I think by 30 years, we're going to see a lot more.
Well, and to that point about the latency period of these asbestos-related cancers, lung cancer related to asbestos exposure and mesothelioma, both, as you said, have long latency periods. Patients exposed to asbestos may not develop mesothelioma for 20 to even 60 years after. So now that we're hitting that 25-year mark, do you expect or anticipate that we'll be seeing more diagnoses in the coming years?
Well, I'll tell you, I see it in my own practice. I think, the government and all these registries are monitoring it, but just my own anecdotal experience, I'm seeing a lot more of these cancers. And the one thing that is interesting that I'm seeing in my office as well is a lot of reflux. And reflux, we know, is a result of exposure to the debris that was happened on 9/11, but that also predisposes you to esophageal cancer. So there are many different angles, not just lung cancer, mesothelioma, but esophageal cancer. Those are the three big things that I deal with as a thoracic surgeon. So in my office, that's what I am seeing.
And I think, do you feel that the public sees this as, I wasn't at ground zero, I wasn't at the site, so my exposure was less? And there is a dose response relationship, that your risk is higher the more exposure you have and for longer periods of time. But as we know, there is no safe level of exposure. So in trying to communicate, that public awareness campaign we were talking about, do you feel that people are aware that they could be at risk and that screenings or those conversations need to be happening more as we go forward?
I do. I think you can always educate the people more. The problem with screening is you can't even get the medical community to do screening. For patients who are high risk for lung cancer, et cetera, maybe 20%, if you're lucky, of the population are getting screened. It was in the single digits for the longest time. And now it may be up to 20. So if you cannot convince the medical community to screen patients who are at high risk, good luck having the rest of the community involved with screening. But the 9/11 group is a very tuned in group. The problem is, how do you get them into that group? Because I know many people who live down there who were exposed, I was exposed, who are not getting screened. And I think it's important to bring them in as well.
I will say the World Trade Center Health Program noted that they'd added more than 10,000 members just in 2024 alone. So that continued enrollment, do you feel that that speaks to what we're talking about as far as latency and some of these diagnoses like emerging now?
Absolutely. You got to get anyone who has any exposure there involved and get them screened. It's just so simple. If you catch something early, you do a little bit and you can cure them. If you wait till it gets all over the place, you probably can't even do surgery. So the earlier that you can find something, the more chance of cure without an insult to the body. You wait a long time, it's going to get bigger. You need a bigger surgery to get rid of it. If you ever saw the movie A Bronx Tale, when the little guy, Colangelo, is talking with Sonny, Sonny gives him a lecture about life. And he actually brings up cancer. He goes, cancer, you got to get it before it gets to you, or else cancer gets too big. That's why you got to cut it out. So even a basic story of life, like in A Bronx Tale, understands that if you catch it early, you're better off.
Thank you for that. I think that does help kind of bring it all together. So, you talked a little bit about the patients that you were seeing at the time. They had immediate exposure, there was inhalation, and then over time, you've been seeing patients developing cancer. Can you just share with us a little bit what that's looked like, that evolution of the treatment that you've done, the patients that you've worked with, and if there are particular patient cases that have stuck out in your mind?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the biggest patient cases that sticks out in my mind is a police officer who was down at 9/11. He ended up having cancer 7-8 years ago. I operated on him and he's cured. And I see him every year with the CAT scan. And every patient, before they get their CAT scan, they're waiting in a room and they are scared. And they are waiting for you to walk in and waiting for their life to get turned upside down. First thing I say when I get into the room is I say, no cancer, so that they can relax. And their whole body posture changes and everything. This one particular police officer, I started talking about 9/11. I said, they've got this new moment of silence for those who died of 9/11 illnesses. Automatically, his face changed. His eyes welled up and he started to talk and his voice cracked. And he was talking to me about the people who were working on the pile, the construction workers and the cops and the firemen and everything. And what was really affecting him is not the people who died at that moment. It was the people who had survived, who were working on the pile, who then ended up dying later on. That slow development of cancer leading to death got him more emotionally rocked than we were all, shattered when all those people died. But this is a different thing that few people really grasp because it's slow motion. Like I said, society reacts to catastrophe, to slowly progressive disease that kills you and upends families and changes lives on a slower level, one day at a time, one funeral at a time. That is a different perspective. And I could see he had PTSD. And I felt horrible that I had brought this up. I just saw how we talked more about other people's cancers than we talked about his cancer. So he was living life feeling, I gotta say, I think survivor's guilt. And that really struck me because I did not expect that. And it made me think about all these people who are really suffering in slow motion. That 9/11 is not finished for them.
The patients that you're seeing who are more recently diagnosed, because there has been so much time from 9/11 to now, do you feel like their experience with this or the way that you're kind of bringing them into this experience of treatment and what cancer means for them differently? Have things shifted?
So the patients that are being screened who develop cancers, then they see me, then they're cured. Physically, they're fine. Emotionally, they're a wreck. But then you have another group of patients who were not being screened, who have developed advanced cancer that I cannot take out with surgery, who are going to die. And that's something that is even more upsetting because if they were being screened, there's a good chance they could be saved. So screening is essential for this patient population, right? You don't want to just screen anybody. You want to screen those who are at higher risk. If you're a 9/11 and you've been exposed to that, you're at higher risk. You need to be screened. Now, not everybody understands that, which is why outreach to the group of high-risk patients is critical to make sure we can do the right thing for them.
And what would you say to people who were living and working in New York as far as their risk goes? What would you want them to know?
From my standpoint as a thoracic surgeon, those patients are high risk, and I want each of those patients to get a yearly low-dose CAT scan. It's that simple. And there are many things that you identify with it. And the biggest thing, or the biggest downside, there's been a group that's anti-screening. Don't screen, you don't want to do too many things to the patient, there's overdiagnosis. And to that group, I will tell you, there is no such thing as overdiagnosis, only overtreatment. So you want to make sure that you are being seen with people who are experienced in these findings, that not everybody goes to surgery. You don't want a surgeon with a quick trigger finger. You want to make sure people who are experienced are following you and following your scans and know what to do when they run into an issue, a positive finding on your CAT scan.
How has your recent research into the benefits of surgery and eligibility for patients and when to perform surgery and the types of surgery influenced how you're treating 9/11 related patients?
So it's very important. You break it down based on disease. So with lung cancer, if you find a lung cancer based on following somebody from 9/11, you see a little nodule there, you don't touch it, you watch it. The next year, is it a little bigger? The following year, is it a little bigger? Okay, it's gotten to be this size. While it's this size, it's not going anywhere. Now's the time to intervene. You make 3 little small holes and you cut that thing out. Meanwhile, the patient who was exposed but who is not being screened has a bigger cancer, and you're doing a lobectomy on them. You're taking out 1/3 of their lung, and you're making a big incision on their side. Then you take the mesothelioma patient. You have somebody who, after following them with their pleural fibrosis, you find, okay, this patient does have mesothelioma. When you find it early enough, you do a pleurectomy decortication, where you just take the lining of the lung and you spare their entire lung. Meanwhile, you got somebody else where their lung is completely destroyed, and then you're doing an extrapleural pneumonectomy on that patient. Then you take the esophageal cancer patient, a patient who has reflux, who's having acid reflux, heartburn, etc. Then you're following that patient and you're doing scopes. You do an endoscopy, you find a little esophageal cancer, you get it out with surgery, they're cured. The patient who's not being screened, they end up developing esophageal cancer, they're getting chemotherapy, they're getting radiation, they're getting bigger surgery where you're taking out the esophagus and you're putting colon up there because it's a lot more advanced as opposed to someone that's found early. So there are many advantages to screening. And one of those biggest advantages is the treatment is not as punishing as somebody who's more advanced. So to me, it's a no-brainer.
As far as emerging treatments, immunotherapy is relatively new in the scope of lung cancer and mesothelioma treatment. Do you feel like the integration of that from a multimodal perspective has transformed treatment for patients?
Yeah, I mean, immunotherapy has changed the landscape of lung cancer treatment. I have actually all cancer treatments, melanoma, breast, etc. So it's a huge piece of the puzzle. The thing is, though, what's more important than an advanced cancer treatment with immunotherapy, surgery, radiation is if you catch it early. If you catch it early enough, you don't need immunotherapy. You don't need chemotherapy. So I think that's more important than anything else, right? Immunotherapy has definitely helped patients live longer. But to cure somebody, you need to catch it early and remove it with surgery. That's ultimately what patients want.
As far as looking ahead, and we've talked a little bit about the diagnoses yet to come, sadly, and screenings and being able to catch this early. So when we talk about Never Forget and we talk about the 25th anniversary, what do you want people to remember most about the patients that you've treated, where things are going, and where we are now?
In my mind, the biggest thing with Never Forget is we've got live patients now who are suffering as a result of 9/11. Let's not forget them. Many of them were first responders, cops, firemen, construction workers, who were cleaning up that stuff. They felt the air was safe, and it wasn't. And so I think it's important not to forget patients like my patient with lung cancer, who's a police officer, my patient with esophageal cancer, who's a firefighter. They're still alive, and we got to make sure we continue to take care of them. I think, you want to respect the people who were dead and give them the acknowledgement and to remember what they sacrificed. But in my mind, I want to take care of the people who are still alive. And there's no moment of silence for them. This new moment of silence is for those who died of 9/11 illnesses over the past 25 years. I've got live patients who are not being acknowledged, who sacrificed back then, not knowing that they're getting cancer now as a result of it.
I can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk about this.
No, thank you. I'm glad we're able to get the message out.
And I think for anyone listening, the takeaway is talk to your doctor. If you were living, working, if you were down in New York at the time, talk to your doctor. Make sure they know your history, right? And ask about screenings.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing. You're down there, you're not sure whether or not you qualify. Go to your doctor. Say, hey, I was down there when 9/11 happened. I'm scared. What can I do? And they'll do the right thing.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it very much.
Have you or a loved one been exposed to asbestos? You may have legal options. Contact the Mesothelioma Center at asbestos.com or call 833-628-8546 to reach one of our patient advocates today. Got an idea you think we should talk about? Or maybe you'd like to join us on our podcast? Please email us at podcast@asbestos.com.